Welcome back. Increasing access to credit. Fair Isaac, the company behind the FICO score, is rolling out a major change. The UltraFICO score will go beyond payment history. According to the Journal this morning, it will factor in bank account activity, how consumers manage their cash and checking, savings, and money market accounts. It launches next year. Joining us right now to talk more about that is Mark Hamrick. He is Bankrate.com senior economic analyst. And Mark, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good to see you.
So you think this is about younger people, this new FICO change? Tell us about it.
Primarily, and we think about the fact that there's a large portion of the U.S. population which really isn't doing business with traditional financial service companies. Millennials have been smart. They're saving more money. Our recent Bankrate survey found that about 2/3 of the American public was essentially limiting its spending, and millennials were doing the best job of saving more money. So that money is sitting in accounts, not necessarily being spent. At Bankrate, we say that the two biggest problems that have been identified by Americans is their failure to save for retirement and for emergencies. So financial companies want to create new customers and help connect them to borrowing products. It's a logical step for them.
Is there a way to opt out of this? It's the last thing I want with the Equifax hacking and everything going on about security. The last thing I want is somebody pull up my UltraFICO to see how much money, cash I have in a bank account, right?
And how you're managing all your money between all your accounts, savings, checking.
Yeah. Well, to the question, I think you're right on. I think Americans are tired of having their personal information essentially taken from them. And I think this is going to be something to watch in terms of regulation in the coming years, whether it's the information that Facebook and Google possess about us or our credit rating scores, because I think we have a sense that we have no control over this information.
What about with this new FICO score? Is this a way to essentially offer people even more credit, if you will? This is at a time when people are increasingly stretched, that you've seen auto lending, particularly on the fringes of people with very low subprime auto lending, really being pulled back on. Is this a way to basically shine up people's credit scores and make them more palatable to the lenders?
It's a very good question. I think that is essentially the tension that could be created by this. In other words, giving loans to people who are not well qualified. But that, I don't think, is the intention. Most financial service firms are not looking to create new losses. Fed Chair Powell has said that he thinks that household balance sheets are in good shape. He's more concerned about the commercial side. So I think this is more about trying to identify good data about consumers and potential borrowers and connecting them to products that they might find useful.
Meanwhile, you've got a new survey on how Americans are spending and if they're cutting back on spending, right? Let's talk about that. 66% said that they're limiting spending. 36% said that they are doing it to save money.
Yes, and I think this is a good thing. As I said, I don't think there are many Americans that go essentially into their last days saying, you know what, I saved too much money. I think more Americans regret that they didn't do a better job of saving for retirement or emergencies.
And I think that 36% was only of the 66% that were saving. So it was only 24% overall that we're saving for longer term. The other thing that was interesting in the study was there has long been a contention that the big difference between how well you do in life is how long your time horizon is. And when you looked at this study, the people who were making over $50,000 clearly had a longer time horizon that they were saving for, whereas the people who were under that were just sort of saving for the short-term needs and they weren't thinking beyond that. How, if we're going to move away from the Keynesian mentality that the more debt you have and the more spending you have, the better off we all are, to one where people are actually more prudent and thinking about their savings, how is borrowing going to help that happen?
I think essentially it's two different questions. I think the first question is, as long as you have a healthy economy, most Americans will be mindful of trying to achieve proper financial goals. I do think in our society we have a significant problem with lack of financial literacy, and that's an education issue which I don't hear a lot of people talking about.
Yeah, that's too bad. It really does start at home, but yeah, we're certainly interested in that.
Absolutely.
Mark, thanks very much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Good to see you this morning. Mark Hamrick joining us from Bankrate.com.